The morning sun filtered through the towering windows of the United States Capitol, glinting off the marble floors and gilded moldings of the hearing chamber. The room shimmered almost sacred in its quiet splendor, yet charged with anticipation. Cameras lined the back walls like silent sentinels, their red recording lights flickering softly, catching glimmers in the polished brass fixtures. They sat unmoving, recording everything, witnessing the drama that was about to unfold. Rows of reporters pressed shoulder to shoulder, notebooks open, fingers poised over pens, murmuring softly as if trying not to disturb the tension in the air. The low hum of their conversation seemed to vibrate through the room like static electricity, a quiet current of expectation and suspicion. At the center of it all, at the witness table, sat Dan Bongino. His posture was impeccable, the straight back, squared shoulders, and controlled movements projecting an aura of discipline honed over decades in law enforcement. His navy suit was crisp, tailored, and immaculately pressed, but it felt more like armor than attire. Years in counter-terror operations, field interrogations, and high-stakes briefings had taught him the necessity of poise. Yet nothing had prepared him for the heat of exposure in front of the nation's lawmakers. Across from him, at the committee dais, Jasmine Crockett exuded an entirely different kind of power. Quiet, concentrated, and almost surgical in its precision. She did not radiate intimidation. She radiated authority, clarity, and an unwavering moral focus that seemed to make the air itself bend toward her. The chair lifted the gavel and brought it down once. The sound reverberated through the chamber, bouncing off the high ceilings and marble walls like the striking of a bell. This hearing of the Committee on Oversight and Accountability will come to order. The chair intoned, voice echoing across the room. Bongino drew a measured breath, inhaling the faint scent of polished wood and paper, the mingled perfume of journalists and aides, the quiet tension of an audience waiting for every word to land. He had rehearsed this moment countless times with the Bureau's legal counsel. Every possible question, every possible answer had been mapped, memorized, drilled into his muscle memory. The instructions were simple: stay calm, stay factual, and whatever happens, do not take the bait. But the air shifted the moment his eyes locked on Crockett's. There was a charged stillness, a static tension that made the hair at the back of his neck rise. This was no ordinary interrogation. This was a confrontation of intellect, of moral principle, and of power in its most public form. Crockett leaned forward slightly, dark hair brushing one shoulder, eyes locked on him with the precision of a marksman. Her voice, calm but resonant, carried across the entire chamber. "Deputy Director Bongino," she began, "thank you for appearing today. We appreciate your time. Though, judging by the headlines, it seems the Bureau has been exceedingly busy defending itself lately." A ripple of laughter moved through the room, soft but audible. Bongino's jaw tightened. There would be no smiling now. "Congresswoman, I'm here to answer your questions." "Nothing more," he said, voice steady but clipped. Her eyes narrowed, dark and focused. "Good. Because today the American people deserve answers that don't come pre-cleared by your press office." The room fell into a tense silence. The faint hum of the air conditioning seemed louder, the rustle of papers sharper. Even the microphones, perched like inanimate witnesses, seemed to lean closer. Crockett opened a thick binder, its tabs and highlighted notes reflecting the morning light. "Let's start with the basics," she said. "In your role as deputy director, you oversaw multiple counterintelligence operations from 2019 through 2024. Is that correct?" "That's correct," he replied, eyes flicking briefly to his counsel, who sat motionless. "And among those operations," she continued, "were investigations into media leaks involving high-profile public officials?" He hesitated only a fraction of a second. "Some of them, yes." "Good," she said, a slight tilt of her head betraying nothing, though a small spark of satisfaction lit her eyes. "Because I want to discuss one in particular, Operation Harborline." A subtle buzz ran through the press benches. The name had surfaced months ago, then quietly vanished under layers of official denials. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. Bongino's hands curled beneath the table. "That operation remains classified," he said, his tone firm, trying to mask the tension in his shoulders. "Not anymore," Crockett said softly, sliding a document toward him. "Declassified by executive order this morning." He leaned forward slightly, scrutinizing the paper. The red stamp sprawled across the header. "Declassified executive order." 14502. The weight of the moment pressed against him. The floor felt as if it had tilted slightly, the room suddenly smaller, the spotlight sharper. Her voice softened, deceptively gentle. Operation Harborline, Mr. Bongino, was designed to trace foreign disinformation networks targeting U.S. political institutions. Yet records indicate that under your command, domestic journalists and congressional staffers were monitored. How do you explain that? He lifted his gaze slowly, attempting to project calm. We were tracking digital footprints linked to foreign actors. Some incidental domestic surveillance was unavoidable. Incidental, she repeated, emphasizing the word as if tasting it. Do you consider members of Congress incidental? Murmurs rippled across the room. The chair's gavel came down sharply. Order! Bongino's voice dropped slightly, tight with controlled frustration. I don't, but data streams overlap. It is not always possible to distinguish American IP addresses from hostile proxies in real time. She leaned back, unimpressed. So your defense is technical incompetence? My defense, he said, is national security. And my duty is accountability, she replied, voice calm, measured, unflinching. A pregnant pause followed, heavy in its silence. Then she turned deliberately to the large screen behind her. Exhibit A, please. The chamber lights dimmed. A projection flickered to life, emails, memos, internal reports scrolling across the screen. A staff aide narrated softly, reading key passages. Surveillance initiated. Expanded parameters. Continued despite internal objections. These are your subordinates raising red flags, Mr. Bongino, Crockett said, her voice cutting through the hush. Why were their objections ignored? He exhaled slowly, forcing control. Threats do not wait for committees to debate them. Nor does abuse of power, she countered. Cameras shifted, flashes strobing, capturing every subtle movement. Her words landed deliberately, like measured hammer strikes. Bongino tried to steady his breathing, the mantra repeating in his mind. Stay calm, do not react. Tell me, she pressed, how many American citizens' data were collected during Operation Harborline? I can't disclose, or you can't, or you won't, she interrupted sharply. His eyes flicked to the chair. No intervention came. Crockett leaned forward slightly. You swore an oath, Deputy Director, to protect the Constitution, not to reinterpret it. His voice dropped, low and taut. You don't understand the pressures. You've never been in a crisis room watching threats unfold in real time. Her reply was razor sharp. And you've never had to face voters to explain why their privacy was stripped away under the guise of protection. The chair shifted uneasily. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Bongino's reflection in the teleprompter glass showed a mask beginning to crack. The carefully constructed exterior of authority starting to tremble. You've built a reputation as the Bureau's strongman. Unbending, unapologetic, Crockett continued, her voice gentler now, almost intimate. But today isn't about strength. It's about conscience. He remained silent. Let's talk finances, she said. You personally approved the renewal of private sector contracts for cyber monitoring tools, contracts exceeding $400 million. One of these companies, Sentinel Data Group, is linked to a lobbying firm representing your post-retirement speaking agency. That's coincidence, he said, though the edge in his voice betrayed him. Coincidence is a poor shield under oath, she replied. He opened his mouth, closed it. A bead of sweat traced his temple. Cameras clicked, capturing the moment like shutters in a storm. Crockett leaned slightly forward. I don't care about your politics, Mr. Bongino. What matters is whether the bureau you lead has become a marketplace for influence. He forced a thin, strained smile. If that's the story you want, I cannot stop it. It's not a story. It's a pattern, she said. The screen behind her shifted. A map of data transfers lit up, red arcs stretching across the country. Atlanta, Phoenix, Baltimore. Each endpoint linked to journalists, advocacy groups, congressional aides. Bongino leaned in. Those visualizations prove nothing. They lack context. Context comes later, she said softly. But remember, the nation is watching. Silence descended. Even the air vents seemed muted, the faint hum of technology overwhelmed by the weight of scrutiny. You joined law enforcement knowing the value of evidence, she said. So tell me, when did accountability become optional? Never, he said, a faint edge of fatigue in his voice. Then show it. She passed him another document. Email from Special Agent Hirsch dated March 17, 2022. Deputy Director Bongino instructed continuation despite legal review indicating overreach. That's your signature, correct? It is, he admitted. Did you send that instruction? In context, yes. We were days from intercepting a major threat actor, so the law was inconvenient, she cut in sharply. He slammed his hand on the table. You don't know what it's like out there. Crockett's tone dropped almost to a whisper, unwavering. You're right. I don't know what it's like to forget who I serve. The room fell into a heavy, almost suffocating silence. Bongino's instincts surged, the old reflex to fight, to dominate, to control, and yet here, across the table, the adversary was human, visible, armed only with facts and moral clarity. Congresswoman, hesitation costs lives, he said finally. And abandoning principle costs nations, she replied. The chamber seemed to vibrate with the weight of that exchange. The chair glanced at the clock, preparing to break the tension. We'll take a 10-minute recess. Crockett raised a hand. One final question, Mr. Chairman, before we break. The gavel hovered in the air. The chair nodded, allowing it. She leaned close to Bongino. Deputy Director, are you willing to release the internal audit of Operation Harborline, unredacted, to this committee? His mouth went dry. I must consult with whom? She interrupted. Those already under investigation? He froze. Her voice softened again. A final twist of the blade. Transparency isn't permission, Mr. Bongino, it's patriotism. The gavel struck. Recess, but the room remained still. Cameras flashed. Reporters surged. Yet Bongino sat, staring at the declassified file, the red stamp burning in his eyes like a brand. Crockett collected her notes and walked past him. She paused close enough that only he could hear. It's not over, she whispered. He didn't answer. Couldn't. The sunlight outside seemed suddenly blinding, the marble floors reflecting a world moving on while he remained suspended in judgment. The air inside still carried the residue of confrontation, the unspoken weight of accountability, and the certainty that the second half of this hearing would not be survival. It would be reckoning. The 10-minute recess stretched longer than planned, the tension in the chamber refusing to dissipate. When the gavel finally sounded, Bongino returned to the witness table, slightly late. His tie was loosened, a faint sheen of perspiration on his forehead, and the exhaustion around his eyes betrayed the strain of public scrutiny. He had faced crises under fire, hostage negotiations and battlefield decisions, yet none of it had prepared him for the slow suffocation of exposure under fluorescent lights, microphones, and the eyes of a nation. Across the room, Jasmine Crockett remained poised by the committee dais, consulting with staffers. Her presence was magnetic, drawing the room's focus effortlessly, yet she radiated calm. Every movement, every gesture, deliberate and measured. She returned to her seat with a quiet authority that seemed to make the air itself defer to her. The chair's gavel fell once. The committee will resume its proceedings. Bongino straightened his papers, attempting composure. I am prepared to continue. Crockett's eyes locked on his. Then let's continue where we left off. She clicked a remote. The big screen behind her came alive again. Time-stamped, grainy video clips flickered across it. A command center, monitors glowing, agents working at consoles. Bongino appeared briefly in the corner, leaning over a terminal. Issuing instructions, Mr. Bongino, Crockett said, voice calm, commanding attention. This footage is drawn from your internal surveillance logs, dated March 21, 2022. Do you dispute its authenticity? He cleared his throat. No, but context matters. Context, she said evenly. You will have your chance. For now, confirm the accuracy. The video paused on a still frame, Bongino leaning over two subordinates, animated but controlled. Subtitles appeared, transcribed from audio retrieved through the Bureau's own servers. Push the trace. Legal will catch up later. That is your voice? Crockett asked. He stared at the frozen image, the weight of it settling over him. It is. Would you care to explain what you meant by legal will catch up later? He rubbed his temples. It was shorthand. We were operating under intense time pressure. Against the law, she corrected softly, deliberately. He looked up sharply. That's not fair. It is accountability, she said. It rarely feels fair to those facing it. Reporters murmured. Cameras zoomed in. Every phrase, every hesitation amplified. Crockett advanced her line of questioning, producing an agent's written report. Reading aloud, Deputy Director Bongino authorized expansion of parameters to include domestic accounts without renewed warrant justification. She allowed the words to hang. Was that expansion under your order? It was my decision, he admitted. We had actionable intelligence demanding immediate action. Speed does not excuse illegality, she said, calm, unwavering. He exhaled, trying to steady his voice. Congresswoman, you are judging with hindsight. In the field, seconds determine outcomes. Her tone softened slightly, but gravity remained, and in governance, principles determine nations. The exchange unfolded like theater, unscripted yet inevitable. Each pause seemed rehearsed by fate itself. Let the record show, she said, addressing the room, that the witness confirms extending surveillance without renewed authorization. Bongino's fingers gripped his pen until the tip cracked, ink bleeding faintly across the page. He wiped it away, leaving a shadow like bruised skin. She shifted gears, leaning in. Deputy Director, you once said that integrity is the currency of law enforcement. Tell me, when did you start spending it? He blinked, defensive. I reject the premise. Then prove it with action, she countered. Release the audit. Her persistence was methodical, surgical. You're asking me to expose ongoing operations, he said, voice low. I'm asking you to demonstrate that you still honor the badge you wear, she replied. The chamber stilled, the weight of history pressing down. He glanced toward the committee counsel, who avoided his gaze. The protective shield of bureaucracy had vanished. A voice broke the tension. Representative Torres interjected from across the chamber. Mr. Chairman, will the witness answer directly? Will he release the unredacted audit? Bongino's throat worked painfully. If directed by the Attorney General, not conditional, Crockett snapped. Yes or no, he hesitated too long. Cameras clicked. Silence itself became an answer. Crockett leaned back, resolute. The committee will note the witness declines voluntary disclosure. He opened his mouth, but she raised her hand. No need. Your silence is eloquent. Turning another page in her binder, she asked, Communications with outside consultants. Between March and June 2023, you exchanged over 80 emails with a private contractor, Shadowpoint Analytics. Confirm that? I confirm correspondence, he said carefully. And Shadowpoint subsequently received a federal contract valued at $96 million approved by your department? The selection process is independent, he said cautiously. Except for the letter of recommendation you signed, she countered, producing the document. Lower right-hand corner and your signature. That was procedural courtesy, he replied, though the edge in his voice betrayed unease. Procedural corruption, she countered. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The chair banged the gavel. Order! Crockett's voice dropped, drawing every listener closer. Integrity is not paperwork. It is the boundary between serving the people and serving power. And Mr. Bongino, you crossed it. You're politicizing national security. He shot back, frustration rising. And you weaponized it, she said evenly. The words hit like verdicts. Bongino sat frozen, confidence dissolving under the glare of the cameras and the weight of accountability. Then, almost unexpectedly, he spoke softly, confession creeping into his tone. You think I wanted this? You think I liked watching the Bureau become a chessboard for politicians? We fight with fragments of truth while the system decays above us. Her expression remained calm. Then why didn't you speak sooner? Because truth from within gets buried, he said. Or cleansed, she replied. Depending on which side of history you choose. Fatigue, perhaps sorrow, softened his eyes. You want a villain. I'm just the symptom. Sometimes symptoms are more lethal than the disease, Crockett said. A ripple of murmurs passed through the chamber. He leaned back, exhausted. You don't understand how politics infiltrates law enforcement. Then explain it, she said. On the record, he hesitated. Off the record, no, she interrupted. Here now, he exhaled, defeated. There were pressures, funding tied to committees, requests disguised as inquiries. Want to know who corrupted the Bureau? Look to the politicians calling investigations by day and leaking results by night. The stir through the chamber was electric. The chair looked uneasy. Mr. Bongino, you are straying from topic, am I? He snapped. You all built this monster and sent me to feed it. Crockett's voice cut through with precision. Then you should have starved it. Silence followed, thick and palpable. She studied him long, then closed her binder. "Mr. Chairman, I recommend the committee subpoena the full internal audit and refer potential criminal violations to the Inspector General." "So ordered," the chair said, voice trembling slightly. Cameras flashed, microphones captured every whisper. Reporters surged, shouting into phones, breaking the first wave of stories. Bongino remained seated, unmoving, the weight of his choices pressing on him like lead. Crockett paused near the dais, turning back once. "Deputy Director," she said quietly. "History grants second chances, but rarely to those hiding behind power." He did not respond, his eyes following her until the chamber door swung closed behind her. The lights dimmed slightly as technicians powered down cameras and microphones. Reporters swarmed the hallways, broadcasting breaking headlines. The city outside moved on, oblivious to the moral and institutional reckoning occurring within the chamber walls. Bongino pulled the declassified file closer, fingertips tracing the bold red letters. For years he had believed that purpose justified pressure, that the badge rendered him untouchable. Now, surrounded by marble, glass, and witnesses, he saw the cost. Not just a career, but the self he had defended, slowly unraveling under the harsh light of accountability. A clerk approached timidly. "Sir, you're free to leave." He nodded, stood, straightened his jacket. The microphones on the table remained pointed at him, silent observers. For a moment he almost spoke. Words of honesty, maybe even redemption, but they never formed. He walked toward the exit. Sunlight spilled into the corridor, blindingly bright compared to the dim chamber. His reflection stretched along the polished floor, fractured and elongated, a visual echo of the man he once thought unbreakable. Behind him, the chamber doors closed, the latch clicking final. Not just the end of testimony, but the beginning of judgment. Outside, cameras waited. The world continued, indifferent, while the future he no longer controlled loomed ahead.